Hello, good people. I think I'm live. Hi, good morning. I know it feels weird because I'm not usually live at this point. For newcomers, hi, I'm Lurie Daniel Favors. This is my channel. And usually what happens is I'm going live when we have a simultaneous stream happening of my SiriusXM Urban View radio show. Today I'm out in them social justice streets. I got social justice work to do. So we're going to give y'all the news that you need today because and I got to do it really quickly. I'm going to give it to you ahead of the show actually starting. Urban View, just know that I love y'all. For those of you who are part of the Urban View radio audience, today's show is going to be fire. It's amazing, but it is pre-recorded. It's fine. You're going to be all right. I'm not going to leave y'all wrong, and I'm going to make sure that you have the information that you need. But we got a lot to get into this morning, so I want to go ahead and get started because I don't have a lot of time before I got to get on this train and make sure I make it to my first of many activities that I have to accomplish today. Now, let's get into it. Today is Thursday, September the 25th. First up, I want to talk about something that took place yesterday. We learned during the live show. Oh, hi, everybody. I see people coming on into the chat. We learned during the live show yesterday that there had been a mass shooting, right? A mass shooting at a Dallas ICE facility. Now, then when this story was initially reported, we were told that the people who had been shot were police officers. Now, one thing we know about Americans is that they do not like a shooting. They will definitely do everything they can, so long as what they can do is thoughts and prayers. They certainly care about shootings, not necessarily enough to force their elected officials to do anything about it, but that's also complicated because their elected officials are largely paid by corporations that benefit from gun sales and ammunition sales, which means they benefit from gun death. But when the story first came out, we were told that it was ICE officers who had been shot. And that was going to be crazy because anytime police officers are shot in this country, you will see efforts towards politicization around the issue. But what we end up later finding out was perhaps a little bit different. So the first bit of news that we got was from Keystone cop Kash Patel, who was also the head of the FBI. And he had published an image of the bullets that were found. Because remember, all we know is that 3 people got shot. They told us it was 3 officers. He published the pictures of the bullet casings. Now, I don't know whether or not Kash Patel knows this, but he is destroying the ability for the FBI to actually prosecute these cases. We have talked about this before with the way that they fumbled everything that went on in the investigation for that man that unalived that other man who died in what was it, Utah? In that very terrible, tragic way. And they basically have fumbled every aspect of the investigation in that case. And it seems like they're doing the same thing here. But basically, Kash Patel said that on the bullets and in the picture of the bullets, it had the words anti-ICE, which Donald Trump and Kristi Noem and all the others who are part of the Keystone Cop crew, they decided, they were like, oh, the shooter must have been a radical leftist. Had to be a radical leftist, and the messages on the bullets prove it. Now, what's interesting about this is that this shooter does have things in common with previous shooters in that he is young, white, and male. I'm sure you were not surprised by that because have we ever seen a mass shooting where there were not young, white males involved? Technically, there has to have been some. Yes, John. Yes, we have seen that at least once. I remember that the brothers in DC, that did happen, but I can point to the one time that I remember that happening. But basically, they said the messages on the bullets prove that this was a radical lefty. Now, the message on the bullet said anti-ICE. Now, I am familiar with people who say fuck ICE. I'm familiar with people who say abolish ICE. I'm not really familiar with people who say anti-ICE. It don't even roll off the tongue really well. Now, Antifa is anti-fascist, so I get why they were trying to go with that, but it don't even sound good. It don't even work right, but they was trying to convince everybody that this was some radical leftist. So I just want us to walk through this using common sense so that we can all be on the same page because again, don't nobody say anti-ICE. They do say fuck ICE and abolish ICE, but not anti-ICE. But we are basically supposed to believe that this mass shooter was such a good shot that they were able to, with just 4 bullets, injure 3 other people and unalive themselves. So that's the 4th bullet. And they were so radical lefty and so anti that they decided to shoot up an ICE detention facility. But the only people who got shot was the ICE detainees, was the immigrants. And we supposed to believe that a radical leftist who went to an ICE detention center to shoot at the detention center because they hated ICE shot only the people being held in the detention center. I feel like they be having conversations like, do we think they stupid or do we think they dumb? Either way, this shit is it's absolute bananas and it's bonkers. But we are supposed to believe that the radical lefty who hates ICE so much that he don't even use language that radical lefties tend to use, and he shot up everybody but ICE. And then himself. It don't pass the smell. It don't pass the fart test. It don't pass the smell test. Don't nothing about this sound good. But we're gonna leave that there because we're gonna see how this plays out. I suspect it's gonna play out similarly to everything else. And by the way, what is happening with that investigation into that man who unalived that other man in Utah? Ain't heard a whole lot about that recently, have you? But let's get on to some other stories. Next up, really quickly, why is private citizen Kamala Harris in it? Like, whether you voted for her or not, I think we can all agree Kamala Harris is a private citizen. She is currently on a book tour. Now, I was not at the event where she was appearing last night. She actually had two really dope, sold out, from what I understand, town halls. And I know it was dope because I had people who was in there who was sending me messages and information. And then I got to see what all the reports about the incident were, or the event were. But her book, 107 Days, which I did get, and baby, it is a read. Okay. She is, I feel like she is tapping into her inner black woman. I know a lot of y'all don't think she black, not y'all, but I know a lot of y'all's cousins don't think she black, but she clearly tapped into some things. And so I'm enjoying it. I'm only part way through, but I was very surprised yesterday to realize that she was getting interrupted by protesters at the town hall, like protesters who are protesting on behalf of Gaza. Now, I am grateful that the UN and most nations in the world are now formally recognizing Palestine as an actual nation state. I'm grateful for the fact that the UN has basically said, yes, this is genocide. So we can now say that without necessarily being criminally prosecuted. Although then again, we live in America, so be careful with that one. But the UN said it was genocide. I'm not saying it. That's what the UN said. I mean, I'm saying it, but I'm not. That I'm quoting. I'm quoting. But basically, we are in a situation right now where Kamala Harris ain't the president. Why are you protesting Kamala Harris? She was repeatedly interrupted by pro-Palestine protesters. Meanwhile, whole ass orange ass Donald J. Trump was in New York City yesterday. I think he might even still be here because the General Assembly is still happening. Why y'all not protesting Donald Trump? Ain't he the president? Didn't y'all protest Kamala Harris and tell people not to vote for her because she was a part of Genocide Joe's campaign? And y'all said that you would rather have Donald Trump. Why you ain't protesting Donald Trump? Why you interrupted? It's a private citizen. She's selling books. You ain't gotta like her. You could think she cackled too much, but this is dumb. And I cannot imagine the amount of resources that go into getting people who paid us a pretty penny to get into that event to stand up and protest somebody who ain't got no political power. She already said in an interview she ain't even know if she's gonna do politics anymore. Although based on how she describes what's happening in this book, I hope she does. I hope she does. But let's continue the conversation because I want to make sure y'all get the news. Oh, but as Kamala Harris said, what's happening in Gaza is terrible, but she ain't the president. So why are you here? What's happening? Let's get on with some of the news because this is something that I think people really need to understand. And this is why I really encourage you to follow international news sources. They are, yes, biased. They are not necessarily, there's no free from bias sort of reporting, but it is really important for you to understand what's happening internationally. Let me talk about Argentina for just a minute. But before I do, and I just want you, I promise you, you're going to feel like this is something that ain't got nothing to do with you. Where is your wallet right now? Is your wallet in your pocketbook? Like your wallet sitting next to you? I want you to think about your wallet as I'm telling you this story, because the story I'm about to tell you is going to directly impact what's happening in your wallet. So let's back up just a little bit. Y'all know how Donald Trump's policies suck. Right? They suck. And even the people, as it pertains to the economy, even the people who voted for him are really, really struggling right now. And if that storyline is new to you, that means you must be new to me. Check out any of my episodes, either on my podcast, Lurie Breaks It Down, which releases a new episode every morning at 6 a.m. and at 2 p.m. Of course, the 6 a.m. is the moment of gratitude where you can get your life and focus and whatnot. But the 2 p.m. is where we hit you with the hard news. So I'll go more into this topic in the hard news later on today because I got to get going because I got a train to catch. But basically, Donald Trump's economic policies suck. And people who have voted for him are also suffering in addition to those who didn't. But Donald Trump has the economic sense of like a toddler who is very spoiled and high off of sugar. And he has a friend in Argentina, the president of Argentina, who's also similarly struggling a little bit. Now, this is going to be an overly simplified explanation of what's happening in Argentina. Really going to encourage you to check out some additional sources, do some research on your own. But basically, Argentina is living in America's future. For many, many decades, going back since the Great Depression, Argentina has had this make Argentina great again sort of approach to things. Not necessarily with the racism, although Argentina has a lot of racism in it. Argentina is one of the Latin American countries that did a whole lot of importing of Europeans because they didn't want to deal with the blend of people who were there vis-a-vis the indigenous people and the African slaves that they had brought there. Because remember, 95% of the enslaved Africans did not make it to the United States of America. They went to Central America, Caribbean America, South America, which is why the largest population of Black people outside of Africa is in Brazil, not in the USA. But anyway, that's another conversation. Argentina has a very, very racist and anti-Black history. But that aside, they basically are in a situation where for decades, they have had very high tariffs and very isolationist practices, which basically means that they were trying to do everything on their own. So you know how Donald Trump is like, we want to revitalize manufacturing. We want everything that's sold in America to be made in America. USA, USA. Well, Argentina been did that. And according to outlets like the City Journal, economists often cite Argentina as a model for how not to run an economy. From 2007 to 2015, President Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner, widow of former President Nestor Kirchner, tried to cut Argentina off from the world and force the nation to manufacture everything at home. Sound familiar? That should sound familiar. The result, factories producing expensive products that no one wanted. The report goes on. Argentina's protectionist policies date back at least to the Great Depression, but during her tenure, President Kirchner imposed high new tariffs, required importers to obtain a very expensive licenses, subsidized domestic industries in the hopes of restoring manufacturing. Does this sound familiar? Because this is exactly what Donald Trump is talking about doing. He's got very high tariffs. He's causing, there's lots of fees for you to be able to bring things into the country. And he said he's going to use this money to reinvest into the economy. But we know that's a whole crock of lie because they just passed the big bitch ass bill, which destroyed the economy. But let's get back to the article. Now, back in the 2012s, New York Times and everybody else was talking about how great it was that Argentina was the most protectionist nation. And by protectionist, they mean that you had to be Argentinian. You had to build things in Argentina if you wanted to sell in Argentina. And they was talking about how great it was. But child, the reality was very, very different. And that makes sense because the New York Times is full of shit. And they have been for a very long time. The gray lady needs to be retired or remade. But whatever. The point is on this topic, now sometimes they get it right, usually they don't. And on this topic, they got it very, very wrong because what was actually happening in Argentina, pay attention, this has to do with your pocketbook and your wallet. What was really happening in Argentina was that they had very high trade barriers because they had these very expensive tariffs and they put tariffs against like 40 other countries. Some of these countries going to sound familiar, China and Brazil. And that pissed a lot of people off. And so other countries was like, well, you going to give us tariffs, we going to give you tariffs. This should feel familiar. This should feel very familiar. China and Brazil impose retaliatory tariffs, just like what's happening against the United States right now. And they created tariffs that were basically going to attack key industries. They refused to buy Argentinian soybeans or soybean oil. Weren't we just talking about American soybean farmers? The jokes write themselves. When you do not know your history, not only are you stupid, but you're in a situation where you will get played hand over fist. And so basically what ends up happening is Argentina and China's like, we're not buying your soybeans. We're not buying your soybean oil. We're not buying nothing from you. And we're going to have tariffs against you. You got tariffs against us. You can do this. We can do this too, boo. Who going to move? Who going to check us all? Because we are in this situation together. And basically the president's policies in Argentina failed. They failed to revitalize the industry. They give one example in this article where they talk about the fact that they banned iPhones. And they said, Apple, if you're going to create an iPhone, you're going to have to be in Argentina to create the iPhone. And Apple was like, no, like it don't make no sense for us to be in Argentina to make iPhones. Y'all don't have the products we need to make iPhones. Y'all don't have the resources we need to make iPhones. It ain't cost effective for us to make iPhones. So Apple was like, I bet we ain't got to make your iPhones deuces. We'll sell to all the other countries in the world where we can make iPhones. Argentina was like, don't you worry, Apple. We got something better. We've got BlackBerry. Y'all remember BlackBerry? When I was a baby lawyer, having a BlackBerry was a big deal. It is not a big deal. But they was like, we got BlackBerry. So BlackBerry in Argentina, they strike a deal. And there's this event described in the National Public Radio, NPR, where they talk about how the president, she at one point is holding up a BlackBerry. I'm pretend this is a BlackBerry. It's an empty phone case. She's holding up the BlackBerry. There's crowds in front of her. They're all cheering, Argentina, Argentina. She's holding up the BlackBerry and she's talking about how this BlackBerry was made in Argentina. And indeed, BlackBerry signed a 2-year contract, or I should say they signed a contract that lasted for about 2 years. And they opened up a factory in one of the islands off the coast of Argentina. And unfortunately, they had to shut down after 2 years because BlackBerry, which was now making BlackBerry phones in Argentina, could not compete. Not with Apple, because Apple wasn't in Argentina. BlackBerry couldn't compete with all the phones that Argentinians were smuggling into the nation because they was like, we don't want your stupid BlackBerry. We want the fucking iPhone like everybody else has got. And so they snuck in a whole bunch of things. And basically, it really kind of blew up in their face when the vice president of Argentina got into big trouble because he was tweeting about the need. We need to build up our local economy. He was like J.D. Vance in it. He was like, we need to build up our local economy. We need to support Argentina. And he put all this out on Twitter. But then everybody know that he was tweeting from an iPhone. So that kind of messed up his whole situation right there. Basically, Argentina is America's future. I go into way more depth on this in the podcast episode that comes out later today. And essentially, it made Argentinian companies far less competitive because what happens when you cut yourself off from competition is the people who you are stuck with, they ain't got to compete that hard. Where you going to go? You don't cut yourself off from competition. America should pay attention. But you should also pay attention, not because Argentina is America's future. You should pay attention because of what happened yesterday. Because what happened yesterday, now let me just bring you up to speed, because remember, your pocketbook is what we're talking about right now. What happened yesterday was, after taking a slash and burn approach to our federal government, after demolishing every single one of the agencies that hold our rights together, after destroying civil rights, destroying integration, disappearing damn near the entire agricultural workforce, either through ICE detentions or striking such fear in the heart of migrants that they're like, what we ain't finna do is pick your goddamn tomatoes, let alone your cherries, after giving permanent tax cuts to billionaires because they had to destroy our healthcare system. They demolished our safety net. They destroyed the food stamp program. They got rid of after school programs. They got rid of funding for higher education. After doing all of that, why did they say they did it? Waste, fraud, and abuse. They did it to save money. Remember, America ain't got no money. They wanted to cut spending. They wanted to cut the spending because the Democrats spend so much on the social safety net. They wanted to cut the spending. Well, they're also going to give Argentina $20 billion. They're bailing out Argentina. They're bailing out Argentina because America sucks. So yeah, Scott Bessent, who was the Treasury Secretary yesterday, does this whole announcement. He's like, yesterday, I spoke extensively with the president, and Donald Trump and I spoke with the president of Argentina and his senior team. And as President Trump stated, we stand ready to do what's necessary to support Argentina and the Argentine people. Now, Donald Trump has said he has all the faith in the world in Argentina's economic policies, which makes sense because, again, Donald Trump has the economic sense of a spoiled toddler high off of sugar and Diet Coke. But the reality is, this is not Diet Coke. He would never. He would never. But this is where we're at. And now we're going to be paying the bill for Argentina because bailouts are paid for by taxpayers. Bailouts are paid for by taxpayers. Now, at the same time, we are in a situation where we got to pay attention to what's happening here in these United States. Oh, Lord, it is warm in this room. Am I having a perimenopausal moment? I might be having a perimenopausal moment. Y'all just gonna have to pray for me because it's happening. It's happening. All my perimenopausal people out there, fight for us, defend us, and support medical research that will help us to heal. Anyway, let me get through this before I have a whole ass hot flash on air. Okay, listen. There's something I talk about very extensively in the podcast. It's very, very important. If you look at your energy bills are probably skyrocketing right now because a third of the country is reporting astronomically high prices. And a lot of people are wondering why, because it's the end of summer. We don't cut off the air conditioner unless you're dealing with perimenopause, in which case the air conditioner can come on at any time. Anytime the air conditioner can get it. So if you're hanging around me at any moment, I might have to have the AC on because this shit is ridiculous. But what's basically happening is people are wondering, like, why are our energy bills going so high? Like to the tune of 70% increases. And one of the things we are now realizing, and there are many more outlets talking more about, is that them data centers, them AI data centers, not only do they drink up all the water, not only do they put out really toxic chemicals into the air, but they also eat up a lot of energy. Now, the reason this is important is because we got corporations who was like, USA, AI, we're going all in on AI. And corporations are like, we're going to fire everybody because we can replace them with AI. Who needs to hire actual people? Well, we can replace them with AI. AI is the future. AI is coming. AI is inevitable. Now, all that's happening. So these AI generation centers are basically, and I ain't even gonna hold you. I have used ChatGPT, and I talk about this in the podcast. I don't like using ChatGPT, but there was one point where I had a report that I had poured my whole heart and soul into, and I thought the report was amazing. I was like, let me just see what this ChatGPT situation is like, honey. I put that report into ChatGPT, and I was like, I am a fucking genius. I wrote that. No, of course I didn't write that. ChatGPT took what I said and refined it. But the point I'm making is this: as convenient as that is, as lovely as that is, as nice as it is to feel as though you have the ability to essentially use this device to help you do anything that you need to do, you need to also be crystal clear. Artificial intelligence is being used to replace the American workforce, which means you are likely using a device right now, a system, artificial intelligence. You are using this system that is basically putting you out of a job. It is increasing the amount of money you're paying on your energy bills. It's decreasing the amount of water that we have to drink. And it's creating a situation where we can't breathe clean air. Like, this is a problem. And that shit don't even work. Hold up. Wait a minute. Did y'all see this report that came out from MIT? This report from MIT, I got to say this really quickly because I'm about to have a moment. Hold on. Let me get my Robert's Rules of Order, which is a wonderful fan. Jesus have mercy. All right. So MIT just put out a report. The report from MIT basically said, out of all the billions of dollars that have been poured into artificial intelligence, I'm talking 30, 40, 50 billions of dollars been poured into artificial intelligence. All the people that have been laid off because all these companies was like, we're going to get artificial intelligence. We don't even need people to work for us no more. Child, MIT found out that of all the billions of dollars that have gone into AI projects for corporations to adopt in the workplace, only 5% of them have worked. Only 5%, and I'm greatly oversimplifying right now because I gotta go, I gotta catch this train, but 5% of this shit is working. 95% of it don't even take off. That's why you got companies who lay off everybody to replace them with AI, and a month later, they're bringing everybody back. Speaking of laying off people and bringing them back, the federal government is doing that as well. A lot of people who have been laid off, who've been basically sitting at home on a 7 month paid, hostily enforced vacation, are getting callbacks. I talk about some of the agencies that are doing that in the podcast episode. But what you also need to know is that as much as we are in a situation where a whole lot of those federal agencies have found that they cannot work without actual people and they're bringing people back, the government, the Republicans are also planning to shut down the government. You need to be aware of this because you might think it's about the economy. I think it's about Jeffrey Epstein, and here's why. And I talk about this more in the podcast episode. Basically, what's happening right now is we have a situation where the Republicans run the White House, they run the House of Representatives by one vote, which we're going to talk about in just a second, and they run the Senate. They run all they have all those places. They are in charge of all of those things. And they are in disagreement with the Democrats about what to do with regards to the economy and paying the bills and credit line increases for the country. We've talked about this before, but basically Donald Trump said this week he don't want to even talk to the Democrats. And the Democrats are like, what do you mean you don't want to talk? We're supposed to negotiate so we can avoid a government shutdown. And Donald Trump's like, shut it down. I don't care. Shut it down. Shut it down. And we're like, wait, why? Everybody's like, why? Why would you do that? Because a couple of things. Number one, they want to use a government shutdown for mass layoffs, even though I just told y'all that at the same time that they had already laid off a bunch of people, they are now issuing mass rehiring options. In fact, if you are part of agencies like the GSA, you might have until the end of this week to decide whether or not you're going to take your job back or not. Again, talk about it more in the podcast. So it's weird because we are clearly dealing with a federal government that can't actually operate or function because they fired too many people, but they're also planning to shut down the government and fire a lot of people. This seems really odd to me, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense until you remember the following. In the state of Arizona, there was a special election this week. The Democrat won, and the Democrat has determined and said publicly that they are going to basically provide a vote to release the Jeffrey Epstein files. Because, as you know, there is a measure pending right now in the House, led by Republican Representative Tom Massey. Shout out to you, sir, and joined by the Democrats who are like, yes, we about that life. We want to release the files. And once this representative from Arizona is sworn in, that would basically provide the 218th vote for this measure that has 217 votes currently to release the Jeffrey Epstein files. You know what can't happen if the government is shut down? As was noted by Dr. Greg Carr this morning on Urban View Mornings. You know what can't happen if the government shuts down? You can't swear in new members of Congress. And if you can't swear in new members of Congress, new member of Congress who just won her election can't provide the 218th vote to release the Jeffrey Epstein files. Do I think Donald Trump is crazy enough to shut down the entire government to prevent the release of the Jeffrey Epstein files, considering how concerned they are about this? I do. You know why? Because we don't talk about Jeffrey. No, no, no. We don't talk about Jeffrey. We also can't talk anymore because I got to go. I got a train to catch. I love y'all. Appreciate y'all. YouTube, thank you so much. If you are new here, welcome. Again, this usually happens at about 10 o'clock. And right now, 10 o'clock, my radio show on SiriusXM Urban View is starting. Urban View, I love y'all. I just had to pre-record today because I got social justice work to do because I have a real job. And to everybody, to the few people in the comments who be like, do you have any credentials? Who do you think you are to be talking about this? To you, I just say, Google me. You'll figure it all out. YouTube, I appreciate y'all. Thank y'all so much for riding with a sister. Love y'all. Be safe today. Keep your head on a swivel. Green Book rules and green books rule. Talk to y'all tomorrow. Peace.